Hi, and thank you for joining us for this episode of The State of Leadership Simple and Beyond. That is Robert Hilliard. I am Whitney Wiley, and we are here on Thursdays, 3 p.m. Eastern, 12 noon Pacific, talking all things leadership. And today we're going to be talking about imposter syndrome and confidence. And one of the things that I'm interested in hearing how this works for your clients, and maybe even you too, Robert. But um, interested always in having conversations with my clients and others where they will say that bring up this imposter syndrome, or that they're not very confident. And as I watch them navigate life and work and other things, I'm like, you seem very confident, right? And we'll talk about it and say, well, yes, I'm confident about this, but I'm not confident about that. And therefore, I'm not confident. Where I find that really interesting, right? So we'll talk about that concept of sort of situational confidence and how it plays a part in our leadership and the things that we can do to improve that, address imposter syndrome, etc. So, opening thoughts.
No, this is one that I am excited to talk about because I do work with clients that it's more confidence on my end. That they talk about with my clients. They mostly need to figure out ways to boost their confidence, or um, they have what I call a confidence crises, where they were humming along, everything was great, and then something happens, and they're like, I want to get back to that place where I was very confident, and so I have some things I want to share about that.
Awesome. Awesome. So let's start at the beginning, right? And we'll talk a little bit about what imposter syndrome is. We could talk about what confidence is. I will leave the definition of confidence to you, but imposter syndrome is a term that came into usage in the late 70s by a couple of psychologists. I'm not even going to pretend to say their names. Um, um, and the thought was that initially that this was something that affected only high achieving women, but it's not the case, right? Research has shown that all kinds of people are affected by it across all kinds of demographics. And some of what we hear in, sort of in the popular realm are people that we know to be a high profile, right? People who are frequently on stage, they are in entertainment industry, etc. And so this can affect all sorts of people. And so if you feel like, you have those moments where you don't really trust who you are and your competence, right? This could be the effect of imposter syndrome, right? People tend to believe that their success is due to luck, or that they don't deserve the success that they have, rather than the work that they've put into it, and their accomplishments are absolutely because of the time and effort, the practice, right, that they've put into it, and that they absolutely deserve the success that comes from the efforts that they've put forth. The way this shows up sometimes is with persistent doubt, right? The inability to realistically assess competency and skills. And that's one of the ways I see it manifest a lot, is that clients will sort of, they don't see what the world sees. And I guess that's really a good way to look at this is that people who are affected by this don't see what the world sees, right? And therefore, it's difficult for them to then accept the success that they have, and um, that they are as good and in lots of ways as they really are. So it will also result in efforts to overachieve, right? People who are constantly, they're working harder and harder to try to prove that they are as good as they are and deserve what they deserve. And it can result in sabotaging, self-sabotage. And one of the ways that I believe it shows up in leaders in particular is the micromanaging and maybe belittling other people as a way to sort of overcompensate.
There are a lot of different symptoms of imposter syndrome. Those are some of them. And I was paying attention to you, but I was looking up an author that I'm connected with on LinkedIn because she focuses on imposter syndrome. Her name is Tara Halliday. And her new book is called Outsmart Imposter Syndrome. I used the earlier book as a resource for one of my clients who was, said that they were experiencing imposter syndrome. So I was looking at that because I wanted to offer that up as a resource for our viewers.
I like it.
Yeah,
I like it.
And so, I agree. With everything you said, and it's very interesting. And I love how you said, at first, they thought it was just high achieving women. Usually people that have imposter syndrome are high achievers, like you said. It's people that have had some level of success, but they don't necessarily attribute their success to themselves, right? Or they feel that they have to work super, super hard all the time to maintain that level of success. So you'll see them kind of overcorrect what they do. They want to, everything they one of the symptoms is trying to be perfect all the time, is one of the symptoms of imposter syndrome. I am by no means an expert. I'll go on and say that. And that's why I offer up those resources to my clients, because I don't want to start coaching around something unless I've done the research. And that was one of the things that I did the research on.
Yeah, I wouldn't profess to be an expert, but I profess to be someone who has experienced this at times. So I have moved through, navigated the, sort of the feelings that come along with this. And certainly you're mentioning of perfection. Right. And it's one of those ways that when it manifests, it often keeps us from taking steps forward. And one of the things that has been helpful to me and helpful, I would think, with my clients, in my work with them, is recognizing a couple of things, right? Looking at some of the myths around confidence, one, and the perceived need to be perfect. And we often feel like we have to be perfect, but we give other people lots of grace and space, right, to not be perfect in what they do, but somehow, in order for us to feel like we can justify our positions, right, the titles that we have, the positions that we hold, the kudos that we get, the awards, the recognition, etc., that somehow, right, we're supposed to be perfect, otherwise it's not deserved.
It's just, or it's going to fall apart, right?
Or
we're going to get found out, so we have to be perfect. And let's face it, we've all been there. Well, most of us have been there to some degree. right? It's like, why are people looking at me? And sometimes it's coaches. This is something that comes up with coaches. You may be coaching someone that has way more education, that is way more accomplished than you are. Um, I don't have that problem, but I've heard tell that some people do. But you get you were like, well, who am I to be working with this person and offering them coaching when they're so accomplished? And my answer to you is, you're an expert in coaching, right? You're not expected to have the answer. You're expected to have the tools that help them come up
Yeah.
with the answer. And so if you're an excellent coach, something to remind yourself of is that you are trained very well to do that.
Yeah.
You have good training to do that. Where it comes to, I don't know if you're ready to switch to confidence, unless you want to talk more about imposter syndrome and how it affects people.
No, you know what? I just thought of an example, right, from my own life, and this will actually lead into the conversation about confidence and situational confidence in particular, versus a universal confidence. And it 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 started with, I think I've shared this story here before. If not, then here you go. I wanted to write. And I actually, the job that I had, the work that I did as a lobbyist and a lawyer, right, involved lots of writing. And somehow there's, in my head, I had this notion that I wasn't a writer because I didn't write particular things,
Mhm.
right? As opposed to thinking, well, I am a pretty good writer. I write well in this context. How can I transfer the skills and abilities that I have as a writer in this area and make it strong in another area? And so it started with, I wrote a article or column, basically for a magazine, or I guess I wrote an article and submitted it. It was published. And from there, I wrote, and I had an idea for a feature article for that same magazine. I pitched it, they accepted it. I wrote the article. It was well received, right? And then I got a phone call from the editor of the magazine saying they were going to be not quite rebranding it, but they were making some changes and they wanted to add some regular columns from people. And I was invited to author this column on a regular basis. It was on leadership, women in leadership. And to the question or the comment you just made, I had this moment. It was like, who am I to write a column on leadership? What do I know about leadership? What do I have to say that other people would want to know? All these questions in my head, questioning what, and it's like, well, what does anybody else know about XYZ, right? Take the time to learn. And what I was being asked to do was to write about leadership from my perspective, which is what I did. Ended up writing that column for 7 years. And I, initially when I was asked, in addition to why would anyone want to read what I have to say, blah, blah, blah. I had, where was I going to find topics to write about 10 times a year? Right. Where would the words come? And I had a conversation with one of my sisters and my husband, and both of them said, well, you're a writer. You're interested in this topic. You study this topic. At the time I was in school, studying leadership, right? And I'm observing leadership all around me. I had been in leadership positions. And so, but I kept questioning, questioning whether or not I was the person that could do that, and and not really thinking about the fact that I was writing I wrote every single day for my job. So I was capable of writing and writing on deadline, which was the other piece that was like really frightening for me. It was
Sure.
like, how am I going to meet these deadlines? Uh, and I was like, you write every day on deadline. Every that is what you do for your job. So why was I having of struggling in the one area when I wasn't in another? And so that's one of the things when I was thinking back. I did a program for a group out of St. Louis a few years ago on confidence, and that's what really got me thinking about this concept of sort of situational confidence, right? And that if we stop with a couple of things, the thought about perfection
Hmm.
and the thought that confidence is all or nothing, either we're confident or we're not, right? If we could let go of the myth of that, then we could it would be easier for us to move through the, sort of this idea of being an imposter, because we are who we are, right? We're fully who we are, and instead of thinking that we have to be perfect and it has to be a particular way, and we accept that perfection is an illusion, and that we have to show up a particular way or be a particular way or have all the answers, which we talk about here on the show all the time, right? As leaders, we do not have to have all the answers. And when we can start to let go of that, the imposter piece can start to fall away.
Well, there's a couple of things, and I'm trying something new. I'm trying not to look for definitions and stuff on my computer while you're talking using my phone. That's not any better. But a couple of things came up, and when you start talking about confidence, I think that one of the reasons why people have an issue with confidence is that we don't reward confidence. When we see a confident person, what do we usually say? Oh, that person is stuck on themselves, right? Because a lot of people, they struggle with feeling confident. So when you see somebody who's confident, you try to poke holes at them. And there's a difference between being confident and being arrogant.
Yes.
If you're good at something here, and I don't know how it is in other countries, but and I don't know how it is in for other people's experience, but I will just use my experience as the starting point. When someone asks you if you're good at something, the polite thing, or how is I'm okay. If you say I'm good at it, or I'm really, really, I'm excellent at it, I'm an expert, people sometimes will look at you like you're full of yourself. And I've experienced that. Um, I'm sure you've experienced that. Um, Sometimes if you carry yourself with confidence, people will feel, as we say, some kind of way about that. So
Yeah.
that's the first thing. We don't really necessarily reward confidence. We admire it in people we like, or but when it comes to people generally on our level, we typically don't reward confidence. It does something to us, our psyche, for some strange reason. And I want to start by just a simple definition of confidence: is the feeling of being capable, right? That you can do something. You're self-assured that you can do something, that you're good at something. Um, and a lot of people seem to think that this is an external thing, but confidence is an internal thing.
Yes.
It's how you feel. It is not based on anything that happens externally, even though it may help you achieve something that other people will see. Because you can be supremely confident and not be able to do stuff. We see it all the time. You see it in we see it in kids, right? There's an old story that I learned, or I guess it's a story about confidence when I was learning to be a coach. And this kid was throwing a ball up in the air and trying to hit it, a baseball, and trying to hit it with a bat, and he kept missing. But every time he threw the ball up in the air, he would say, "I'm the greatest hitter of all time," and he kept missing, right? So he does it like 4 times and he misses, and then he looks at the ball and goes, "I'm the greatest pitcher of all time." He throws the ball and then he misses, right? So that's confidence. So it's not necessarily something you're going to see. That's something I want to put out there, but it will help you achieve more if you believe in yourself and believe that you are capable of doing the thing that you're setting out to do. So I just want to put that out there first before we really start digging into confidence. So that's the first thing I want to say about it.
I like that, and the word that came to me when you started was humility, right? And that somehow if we can't be both confident and humble at the same time. And I don't know the exact definition, dictionary definition of humble, but when I think of humble, I simply think, particularly as it relates to leaders, again, this is about you not thinking that you have all the answers, right? And being humble is not about self-deprecation and self-flagellation and putting yourself down. It is simply an acknowledgement that you don't have all the answers and you don't do anything alone, and that it is then therefore okay to be dependent and interdependent with other people, because the whole point of being a leader is being, leading a team, being a part of a team. And you don't have to have all the answers and do all the things in order for your team to be successful and therefore you to be successful. And I would say the other part that goes along with that is if you are confident to the point of arrogance, or you are feeling like an imposter, right? Because of a perceived need for perfection, let's say, right? It will make you less effective as a leader because you cannot be authentically you in that, right? And if it starts to manifest in the way you interact with other people out of bravado or arrogance or some other feigned way of trying to appear that you have it all together, it's going to have a deleterious effect on how you ultimately lead.
Yeah. And I'm just going to tack on to what you said about being humble. Being humble, it just in a nutshell, is not bragging about the things you're good at. And it's so they can exist simultaneously. You can be confident and humble. But so if someone says, "Hey," and I've had people ask me, "Are you a good bass player?" Yes, I am. Right? I have no doubt about that. Well, I'm not going to say, "Oh, I'm okay." No, because I know the time and effort that I put into things. I know that my skill level. I'm not saying I'm the best. That's different. But am I good? Absolutely. Can you play? Absolutely, I can play that. Can you crush some funk? Absolutely. I have no doubt about that. But to get on here and go, I'm the best, and I can. That's not being humble. And then so it's that approach. And sometimes there's a subtle balance, because you can be really confident and very humble, but some people can be very confident and not so humble. So that's when you start to run into problems. The other thing that I wanted to bring up, and there's an excellent book on confidence called The Confident Mind by Dr. Nate Zinsser. And I've studied that book extensively. So on that, I'm an expert. Not so much on imposter syndrome, but I studied that book and other resources a lot. And one of the things that he explains it so very well in this book is that people think that confidence, and this is going to dovetail into the situational confidence, that people think that confidence is this thing that once you have it, it never leaves you. You need to work diligently to maintain that confidence, which is why we see many professional athletes, after they retire, they struggle because they don't have that thing that they're doing every day to reinforce their expertise. And so, which is why a lot of them, and which is why we see, people do things even sometimes when they are still competing, they try to get into other things, right? And it doesn't go so well for them. I'm not going to mention any names.
Yes. Michael Jordan?
No, that wasn't the one I was thinking.
Oh, okay.
but sometimes that happens. So confidence is something that you have to constantly feed because of how our minds work. You can have a fantastic day, do all these things great, get into one little shouting match with somebody, or have somebody say one negative thing to you, and it will kind of knock you off your perch a little bit. So confidence takes constant care and feeding. And
absolutely,
one of the things that I love about the book, The Confident Mind, is that he actually gives you activities and things like that to help bolster your confidence. But it takes active work on anybody's part to maintain confidence. Some people can do it almost automatically, just by how they're in the position they're in, or their place in society, or maybe how they are raised, right? So they have a strong kind of foundation where they can do that work for themselves constantly and maintain that balance. Most of us can't do that.
That is true. And I love that you brought up, athletes as an example. And it's such a good one because you're talking about, let's say, professional athletes in particular, right? These professional athletes, they have honed their craft to be amongst the best, the top 1%, right, of people doing the thing that they do throughout the entire world. And then when they're no longer doing that and have moved on to something else, they haven't put the same kind of time and attention into something else. And so it would make sense that they wouldn't have the same competency and therefore the same confidence in those things. But the good news is that you can take what you have done in one area and transfer it so that you can do the same thing in a new area, right? So that you can bring what has made you great in one area, and you may not reach the same level of competency and skill in another area, but you could certainly be good enough, competent enough that you can be confident that you can do it. And confidence, as you've mentioned, comes from the doing, right? It is about how you feel, but how you feel is a result of what you do. And so taking action is extremely important, because without it, then it affects your ability to take risks. It affects your ability to be decisive, right? And it affects your ability to communicate effectively, all of which are supremely important in your pursuit of being an effective leader.
Yeah, and the other aspect of it, and we both hinted at this, it's a psychological thing, right? So it requires that you consciously monitor what's going on inside your head and give those, yourself some positive self-talk, some reinforcing self-talk, so that you're building up that credit of confidence. You start to, we see it let's use athletes as an example. You see it when athletes get the yips, right? They talk about the yips. All of a sudden, they last season they were 86% at the free throw line. They had a bad game and they just can't seem to get it back. They still have the same skill. They still have the same approach, right? But something is off. It's the mental game of it. So you have to make sure that you're maintaining that. I believe Dr. Zinsser calls it that credit, that positive credit, so that you are, feeding the psychological aspect of that. And we've all been there. I've been there as a musician. I've been there as a coach. I've been there as a trainer. I've been there in general, an OD practitioner, where you do one thing and you're off your game a little bit. And you said something really key. You said you start to question yourself. Questions that you have will kill your confidence. In fact, that when one of the things that they talk about, or Dr. Zinsser talks about, is game day performance. He says, on game day, ask yourself no questions. Don't utter only statements on game day. And that's something that I employ for myself. Only statements on game day. Because when you start asking questions, we know this as coaches, questions lead to other questions. And before you know it, you're questioning yourself. And it starts then you get that fear. And then it's like, why do I feel this way? Oh my goodness. Then you start projecting into the future. How is this going to affect my performance? And then you start projecting into the past. Remember last time this happened? And then what the outcome of that is, you're not being present. And that is the only way you can perform well, is if you're present, if you're attentive to what's happening in the moment as you're performing. And when I say perform, I'm talking about whatever you're doing, whether it's leadership, whether it's playing the piano, whether it's running a marathon, or Ragnar in your case. When you are present, you're going to have the best performance. But if you're constantly projecting on, oh my goodness, I'm doing really well. Oh wow, I'm really under my time now. Oh, I hope I'm not going to run out of gas soon. Then you start having those doubts. Or then you have that, what if I run out of gas? I'm feeling really good right now, and I'm under my time at the halfway mark. I've never ran this far. Then you start to get that doubt.
Yeah.
And so confidence is one of those things that you really need to be mindful of and really think about. And like I said, care and feed it. Care for it and feed it.
I couldn't agree more, and I love that. Right? No questions, just statements. And so where do the statements come from? Right? Again, this is something that comes from practice, and we've talked about tools that we have shared with our clients. Right? Offer up tools. Can't make people do anything, and ultimately you have to embrace the tools and the strategies that work for you. But certainly affirmations, right? The positive affirmations, the positive self-talk that you do, that is centered around, and here's the terminology that I use with my clients: the objective evidence of the truth. Right, which is to look for the successes, look for the times that you've been successful in doing what you are doing, or questioning your confidence around, or worse, that you've extrapolated a maybe a lack of competency or skill in one area to not having confidence overall. And I guess if I could have one thing for me, one thing that comes out of this is to recognize that a lack of confidence in one area does not therefore make you unconfident.
Yeah.
And that does not make you an imposter, right? That that there is an area, an aspect of your being, your skill set, whatever it is you're struggling with, that you take it and extrapolate that to the totality of who you are as a leader, as an athlete, as a musician, as a parent, as a friend, whatever it is, right? To leave that in the area that it's in, and then the questions that you are going to ask, is it important for me to feel confident in this particular area? And then if it is, what do I need to do in order to turn that around, right? Rather than letting it overtake all of you and saying that you're not confident. If I had $1 for every time someone said that they didn't have confidence, I'd be rich.
Yeah, we wouldn't be having this conversation. Right?
I'd be really rich, right? And it's not, again, the point is not that you don't have confidence, because you do. You need to look to see where your confidence is. What are the aspects of you, your skill set, etc., that you do have confidence in? And you can ask the question, why am I confident here and not confident here? Right? And start to look at why you are confident and successful in some areas, and how can you take lessons from that and apply it to other areas. And sometimes it is because you've done the reps, right? And it's missing over here because you haven't done the reps yet, right? Or you haven't done the thing at all. It's just a notion of something that you want to do. And so, of course, you're not going to be great at being a public speaker if you've never gotten on stage before.
But yeah,
and it's okay. So what do you do in order to turn that around?
So many things bloomed into my head when you were talking about that. I have a friend that told me for years that she's not intelligent, which is interesting because I would go to that person for advice, and she would always tell me how smart I am, and I'm like, well, that really makes no sense. So let's look at the logic of what you said, but that didn't work. So one day I was talking to her, and I said, well, where does this come from? And she's like, well, I'm not good at math. And I said, so that means that you're not smart. Now, to be fair, we consider people like yourself who are very good at math to be really smart people. But that doesn't mean that if somebody is not excellent in math, or it doesn't mean that they're not intelligent. And so one of the things that this brought us down another path in the conversation. And this was very telling and very interesting. So this person said that they're not good at math. She's not good at math, but spent a ton of energy avoiding math instead of being better at it.
Yes.
Right? And so I got into the habit, and this is really funny, but whenever she would say, I'm bad at math, I would say, well, you could be better.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And I said, think about the words that you say. Our brains are so efficient, and what we tell our brains are likely to do. Right? So if you keep telling your brain you're bad at math, you're gonna be bad at math. Right? But if you tell yourself that you could be better at math, your brain will start to react in that way, and you will feel different about it, and you can make some progress. And so the thing that I had mentioned to her is like, well, instead of expending all this energy avoiding situations and numbers in general, why not flip it a little bit and try to get better at it a little bit at a time? That will hopefully deal with your phobia of math. But it was just very interesting to hear this person talk and their rationale for not feeling intelligent and thinking that I was smarter than them. Like, well, I'm coming to you for advice. So why aren't you seeing, the contradiction in what you're saying? But it's that lack of confidence, that was overtaking them and then really steering certain aspects of their life. So it was very interesting that to have that conversation.
That's a really good example, because I've had conversations with clients where I've asked them questions about why, what it would take for them to, I'll take, for example, a client who is an entrepreneur, and we were discussing what it would take to feel like legit in business, right? And and I have this conversation frequently. I have that particular conversation, right, about being an entrepreneur or about being a leader. And very similar to this math example, I don't feel intelligent. Why? Because I'm not good at math. Well, math is just one of thousands of things that you could know, right? As it relates to being an entrepreneur or being a leader, having people who directly report to you is one of tons of things that you have to be an entrepreneur. You don't have to have anyone reporting to you to be an entrepreneur.
Absolutely.
You don't have to have anyone with a title. You don't have to have a title in order to be a leader, right? So to feel like you are not a good XYZ because and not even that one aspect that you're thinking needs to be there, even needs to be there, right? Which is the other piece of it. And I have been there, and I can totally relate. So for the longest time, and since you brought up math, right, and said I was, someone like yourself who's good at math, I never thought that I was creative, because I was good at math and I was analytical and logical. And so I didn't think I was creative. And so I avoided writing. I avoided artistic endeavors. And I kept saying, I'm not good at art. And I would even say, I'm so bad at art that I can't even draw a straight line with a ruler. Right? That this was something that and it clicked, it dawned on me, and probably when I started doing the work, right? If you keep saying that you're not good at it, you're never going to be good at it. Right? And I may never be good at it, but at least I'm going to stop saying that I'm not going to be good at it and give myself at least a try, a chance. And so again, this concept, the confidence and the imposter syndrome, if you keep telling yourself that you have imposter syndrome, so let's start there. Stop saying that you're an imposter, right? Because that your brain will find ways to prove to you that you are an imposter. And chances are no one else is thinking that about you. Your evidence of your friend who you thought was intelligent, so much so that you went to her for help, right? And so I'm asking my clients, so what is the objective evidence that the truth of that tells you the truth rather than what it is you're believing? Right. And in that case, if it's, let's say that had been you and I was like, well, people are always coming to me for advice and asking me questions and information. Right. So starting to look at the truth of the matter, the objective evidence, rather than getting stuck in what we feel, because both confidence and the imposter syndrome are really about what you're feeling. And here's the truth of the matter. What you're feeling is not always the truth. You're entitled You're entitled to your feelings, and you're entitled to feel however you feel,
Mhm,
right? You're entitled to
mhm,
that.
mhm.
But what you're feeling isn't necessarily true.
Yeah.
And so we have to take the time to question whether or not what we're feeling is the truth, and then seek the truth based on objective evidence. Sometimes that's getting feedback from others, others that's just looking at the history of your life. And then again, if you find out that what you're feeling is true and you want to change it, just start making steps to improve it, to get better. Doesn't mean you're going to necessarily flip 180 and become the best at it in the world, but you can make incremental improvements regularly.
You got me when you say what you're feeling isn't the truth. I've had so many situations when people are like, what doing two things where they're saying that I made them feel a certain way. I'm like, how did I do that? And then the other thing, they start telling me how I feel. It's like, but you don't know how I feel. You feel like, no, I don't. I don't feel that way. But it's very interesting. But that it's about doing things differently and making incremental changes, like you say. And here's the funny thing: there's evidence all around us, even in experts, even in some of the best in the world, that they're not good at every single aspect of that thing that they do, but they still have supreme confidence. So Tiger Woods, for example, was terrible at getting out of sand traps. He was awful. And so he worked with this coach to get just a little better, right? So it
Yeah.
wouldn't, and that took his game to a whole new level, just getting adequate at getting out of the sand. Not perfect, not excellent, but just adequate. From really poor to adequate, took his game to a different level. Imagine what doing a little work in that thing that you don't feel particularly strong at, what that could do for you. Imagine all of the opportunities that people miss out on because they're quote unquote weak at something, and instead of making a plan to get better at it, they do all these things and go through all these maneuvers to avoid it, to get around it, to when all you need to do is just take some time, and maybe you're not going to be an expert at it, but you could be better. Just like you
Yes.
could, and that's so. Whenever my friend says to me, "I'm bad at math," I said, "You could be better." I always correct the language. And in fact, it was even today we've had that conversation when I said you could, and then the interesting thing about that conversation was that she was telling me about she took a class in school and the math teacher taught math differently, and she got an A, and she immediately went up to the teacher and said that I think you made a mistake. And the teacher was like, I didn't make a mistake. You got an A. And the concepts were easier for her to understand because he taught it in a different way. And so it's that there's evidence there that this person could be better at what they were doing, but still sticking to the narrative to this day that they are not good at math. And I go, how can I believe that when you just told me that you got an A, right?
So yeah, I I haven't gotten an A in art, but I have done some things where people have said some things in a way that made me realize that I could, right? And I could get better, and I could get better. And so I think it starts with an acknowledgement of the efforts that we make, right? That you can make some effort and get better, incrementally better. That we have to extend ourselves some grace and forgiveness. Again, we don't have to be perfect. And when we can let go of that, the fallacy that perfection is what it takes in order to be an expert. How many experts have had to change their and you can correct me in whichever way I get their theory or the hypothesis, or they do the experiment 1,000 times, 10,000 times, right?
Mhm.
And so experts don't get it right. Experts don't get it right. And so why do you feel like you have to get it right 100% of the time? And so we have to forgive ourselves and then focus on what we learn in the process. And the more we can do that, be compassionate, right? The same way we would be and the same way we generally are with people that we care about. I won't say with other people, because sometimes people can be cruel to other people. But when they're people that we care about, we tend to extend quite a bit of compassion, forgiveness, grace, mercy, right? As they are navigating things that they're working through. And we need to do the same things for ourselves. A couple of other things that you can do to turn this around is to keep track of your progress, right? Journal, whether you call it journaling or not, but keep track of your progress as you are learning things, as you are improving. Keep track of your wins, right? On a daily basis. What did you do well? What did you learn? How are you getting better? And so that you can look back again, more objective evidence rather than focusing on, well, I don't feel like I'm making progress. But if you kept track of the progress, it wouldn't matter what you felt, because you'd be able to look and see. And it's like, oh, well, I am making progress. Then the statements, I am making progress. Every day I'm getting better and better, right? Every day I'm getting better and better. And that starts to feed itself. And you keep taking action. You keep reminding yourself that you are getting better, you're taking action and getting better. And then you can start to feel in alignment with the truth.
I really like that. One of the things that I learned from my coaching teachers was action and reflection, right? So you take action and you reflect on that. You take action and you reflect on that. And really, what I love about what you're saying is chronicling your progress. And the thing that does so many things, because you will be able to see your upward trajectory, but you'll also be able to see, if you're being practical about it, that your upward trajectory is not a straight line. We say
Yes.
this on this all the time. Success is not a straight line. We want it to be a straight line. We tend to look at other people's success and imagine that it's a straight line, but success is not a straight line. And I'm going to put that in, and we're both basketball fans. Look at your favorite basketball player. If they score a lot of points, they're not going to score those points all the time.
Right.
That's why they have a point average, right? That's why it's an average, because sometimes it may be 40 points, sometimes it may be 27 points. So, but it's an
And
average,
sometimes it may be 12.
and sometimes it may be 0.
And sometimes it may be 0.
Right. But it's that, but you have to be able to look at that. And if you started out, and one of the things I love to do is to take a look at an athlete that I like from the very beginning, like the very beginning of their career. Because I ran track for many years, and I still follow track. So I see somebody who's just coming on the scene, and I like that person's style. I like what that person's doing, and I like what that person's about, and I track their career a bit, and I watch how how sometimes they hit a certain level, and so their norm becomes greater than their fastest time before. Now it's the norm, but they're still going to have fluctuations in there,
Yes.
where sometimes they do really well, and other times they do not as good as you think they can, but it's still good enough. It's still better than when they first started out. And that's really important, to see that progress. And it's also important to keep your confidence up when you do that, because you're going to, at some point, you're going to hit a wall, because that's scientific. And I want to talk a little bit about that before we wrap up. That wall is an indication that you're getting ready to make a breakthrough. And so that's what happens. Your mind and your body are looking at what you're working on and conjuring ways to get you to the next level. If you stick with it and you keep pushing, you're going to go beyond, you're going to move beyond that spot. At some point, you will hit your overall threshold, but you can most certainly do more than you think you're capable of.
Yes.
If you condition yourself mentally.
I like it. So, final thoughts?
That was my final thought, Whitney.
That was your okay. That was your final thought. So my final thought is, one, stop saying you're an imposter, right? Stop owning the label of imposter syndrome. Stop owning the label of not being confident, right? The more you buy into that, the more you make that so. You feed into the feeling of that. And so you want to be confident in an area that you're not confident, work on that area, right? Take some effort. Be a little bit better, right? Just be a little bit better. You don't have to, again, go from 0 to 180 in one step. Take baby steps and just be a little bit better in the areas that you want to be better in. Take what you're doing that makes you successful in the areas that you are strong in, and apply those same tactics, those same strategies, the resources, the time, the energy into the other areas. And you will find that little by little, you will build your confidence in the other areas as well. And remember that your feelings, they're valid, but they may not be true. So don't feed into what you're feeling without at least testing the veracity of what you're feeling. Okay. So with that, we want to thank you for joining us for this episode of The State of Leadership, Simple and Beyond. And Robert, if someone wanted to work with you and address what they used to call imposter syndrome, how would they go about doing it?
They can reach out to me at inspireme@roberthilliardcoaching.com, or they can just go to my website, which is Robert Hilliard Coaching, and fill out that form there and let me know what you'd like to work on, what challenges you're experiencing, what goals you have, and we can set up a conversation and really just dig into what you want to work on.
Awesome. And if you'd like to reach out to me, feel free at shiftingintoaction.now.site, shiftingintoaction.now.site. I too have a form that you can complete there to set up a strategy session with me, and we can talk about imposter syndrome, confidence, any other mindset issues, leadership, etc. Would be happy to work with you. So until next time, Thursday, 3 p.m. Eastern, 12 noon Pacific. Take care.
Bye now.